In today's video, I want us to discuss the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and I want to show you things so many Christians miss when reading through Genesis, and I don't want you to be one of them. And the last one in today's video is a very powerful one that I see so many Christians missing. So most people know about the flood, and that is where we're going to draw from the first point in today's video. And the fact of the matter is something about the flood which many of us will easily overlook. So in Genesis 7, as you can see here, I want to highlight one or two verses here because this is when the Lord is obviously bringing the flood upon the earth. And notice what God says to Noah. In verse 2 here, as you can see, it says, "Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that not clean by two, the male and his female." And this is just a passing statement in the narrative of the flood, but it highlights to us that God had already in the book of Genesis outlined and categorized animals in a clean and unclean categorization. Many of us today, we think that these clean and unclean laws come from the book of Leviticus and like Leviticus 11 and passages like that. But the fact of the matter is Genesis 7 has already identified that this was something which they were expected to know already. Now, for the next example in today's video, I want us to look at just two verses a few chapters later. And this is now when the family of Noah have come out of the ark, and it highlights to us something very vital. As you can see here in Genesis chapter 9, verse 5 to 6, notice what God says. He says, "Surely the blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast, will I require it. At the hand of man, and at the hand of every man's brother, will I require the life of man." This is the key verse. "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. But in the image of God made he man." And again, this may be just a passing statement for many people who may, after the hustle and bustle with the flood narrative, may not be paying close attention. But here God is outlining that the death penalty was in force in the book of Genesis after the flood, way before the law of Moses, when the death penalty came into force, it would seem, for the nation of Israel as a whole. I'm not making this video to make a case for clean animals and unclean animals to still be enforced today, or for the death penalty to still be enforced today. But I just want you to understand, as a Bible master, when you're reading through these passages in the Bible, look for the connections and look for the synchronization between different books in the Bible. Now, like I said, the last one in today's video is an extremely powerful one, and the next one we're going to look at is also powerful as well, because the third example is something which we see prevalent all the way through the Israelite history. But a passage like this in Genesis chapter 4 showcases to us again that there were many of these things which were in circulation way before the law of Moses was ever given. So let's look at this passage here in Genesis chapter 4. We could look at a couple of verses here. This is between famous story in the Bible between Cain and his brother Abel. And it says in verse 3, "And it came to pass in the process of time that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel's offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect. And Cain was angry, and his countenance fell." Now, offerings and sacrifices is such a big thing, so prevalent, as I discussed previously. And it's important to understand that in the first couple of pages of the Bible, as you can see here, two men here, right? We're not given the backstory per se, other than their vocation, their work that they did on a day-to-day basis. But we can see here that it talks about an offering being given by Cain, which he brought from the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought an offering from the firstling of his flock. And again, this is the kind of thing which, just by reading Genesis by itself, you may not understand some of the entirety of what's going on here. But as we get into books like Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, when you get to those books, Genesis has already sort of pre-framed, prepared you for some of these offerings and some of these clean animals and death penalties, etc., which are to come later on in the Bible. Now, before we get to the last two in today's video, this one I know is going to be very controversial, because whenever we talk about money and God, because of the just misuse of power by many people in Christendom, this has become a stigmatized sort of topic for us to discuss. But since we're on this theme of this topic, this is one I wanted to talk about just definitely, because I know it's more than applicable to what we're talking about here. This comes from the book of Genesis in chapter 14, and this is something which not a lot of people actually understand. So here is Genesis 14 starting at 18, and notice what it says. This is King Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who brought forth bread and wine, and he the priest of the Most High God. Now he's obviously, as you're going to see here in verse 19, he blessed Abraham, right? Abraham, before his name was changed, is Abram, as you can see here. And he said, blessed Abraham of the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth. And 20 is vital for what I'm talking about here in regards to just the monetary nature of this situation. And it says, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hands. And this last verse here is vital because it gives us a powerful insight about something Abraham did here to Melchizedek, this priest. It says, and he gave him tithes of all. And ultimately, this is the first example explicitly mentioning of tithe in the Bible, basically giving a tenth of your increase to a person of God. In this particular scenario, it was the priest Melchizedek. So I know that there's many people out there today who think that tithe was something which just happened under the law of Moses. It's not. There's two examples. This is the first example of Abraham doing it in the book of Genesis. Now, just before I get into the example in today's video, which I said is really powerful and many people miss it, I just want to mention one and give you homework to basically read this in your own time. And that is in Genesis 12, you can read from 10 to 19. And this is just an example of adultery being a problem way before the law of Moses, the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20. Now, this example is a powerful one, like I said multiple times in today's video. And this is because it's a gospel message in the Old Testament, in the first book of the Bible, and many Christians miss it, and I don't want you to be one of them. This is in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and this is when God is divvying out punishments now, and specifically he's talking about the serpent. And he says, as you can see, and he will put enmity, division between the serpent and the woman. And he says, this division will be between thy seed, the serpent seed, and the woman's seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And this is a powerful passage. This is what is commonly referenced as the proto-evangelium. Proto meaning first, evangelium meaning gospel. This is the first gospel message we see here of the seed of the woman defeating the seed of the serpent. But hopefully you've seen in today's video how detrimental it can be when you miss things in Genesis in regards to the whole understanding of the Bible. And this is an example of an atheist who critiqued Genesis, and look what happened next.